Welcome to the Manufacturing and Engineering Landmines presentation. During this 45 minutes, we're going to give you some tips and some ideas about how to avoid and overcome some of these landmines. Steve is going to go over the agenda here in a second. This is certainly not all inclusive to all the landmines that we encounter, and certainly some of the others will come up maybe in some of the questions. So to start, let's talk about our agenda.
You have this screen share. Okay. Everybody, thanks for attending this session. How we came up with this webinar was just we work with a lot of different customers over time, and we just try to kind of do the analysis of what are some of the things that people get tripped up on a little bit. And so what we boiled it down to is into 4 different categories. Something new, inefficient design, communication, understaffed. Understand this isn't a fully inclusive list of everything that could possibly go wrong, but just some tips and things of how we've seen things resolved and some ways to avoid them. You know, nobody wants to reinvent the wheel, so we're going to try to pass on a little bit of value here.
So we'll introduce ourselves here in a second and give you some contact information. But as Steve said, we have a lot of visibility into lots of organizations in the upper Midwest. And so you can see 2 pictures on the screen here, our view and our vision. There's really a difference between our view and our vision. So we have visibility into lots of manufacturing organizations from many engineering and manufacturing practice perspectives. On any given day, our 90 or 100 engineers are out in the field working on unique problems, unique clients, unique products, all different kinds of situations. And Steve and I, we work with clients all across the upper Midwest, our whole team does, and we share our vision. So that's what we see, and then we share our vision of what's possible to all of our clients. But while we have a lot of visibility into a broad set of unique characteristics, there's really no substitute for our clients, very close view at their own products and their own organizations. So, just as an example, this is, each of us probably has our own story about our most unique manufacturing visit. This is mine. It wasn't in North Dakota. It wasn't even in North America. But when you think of Jamaica, you don't think of manufacturing, and you think of beaches and vacation. But the 18 hours I spent at this client in Jamaica in July was very memorable because it was a company called Jamaica Broilers, a chicken processing plant in Jamaica in July. So, I'm not sure I learned anything other than that's not the place to be in July, but just gives you kind of a sense as to the kind of visibility we have into other organizations. Just a little background. My name is Aaron Sorensen, and my background is in technology. I spent the majority of my career at Great Plains Software and Microsoft, so that's really my emphasis as I work here at Applied. And Steve, I'll have you introduce yourself.
I'm Steve. I've been with Applied for 18 years, and I work on both sides on the software development and on the engineering side as part of business, responsible for business development for the team. We've got a really good team of engineers and leaders in our groups that it's just amazing to work with every day, and we have some great customers. And Aaron and I both, we've talked about this many times, how much we enjoy working with customers and getting them over the humps and bumps that come with everyday manufacturing, engineering, design, software, all that, whether it's resources or new product spin-ups or spin-downs or whatever else. We really enjoy that. And so to try to add some value, this webinar will kind of go through the agenda items now then, and we'll start with, if you're just brand new.
So everybody is new to something. Whether it's basic manufacturing and engineering processes, we have organizations that just want to start out new. They have an idea and they start new and fresh and don't have a lot of manufacturing or engineering experience. Others are really seasoned and maybe they need some help with safety. We had a client here not too long ago that wanted to put biometrics, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, wireless charging, AC, DC charging, all in a small component. Well, the challenge was that they didn't really understand how those were all going to interface with one another and cause interference. And so we're here to tackle anything that is to help our clients with anything that might be new to them. Could be automation, could be Internet of Things. So when you're new, it's tempting to take a shortcut like this guy here who sees manufacturing secrets for $1 and he's really interested in buying that secret for $1. Oftentimes, that's not really the value. So any of these things could be new to an organization. So what are some of the solutions? One is to identify the gaps. What is it that you know really well? And what is it that you don't know very well? And oftentimes, somebody who's new to something, their best friend is Google, and that's an easy, cheap way to go out there and find an answer, but it might not be the best answer. The best answer might be to build relationships. And so when you start out, you might think, well, I'm kind of an island here. I don't have much information. I don't have access to the right people or whatever. And as you build relationships, like with Applied or other similar organizations or even dissimilar organizations, it then gives you a broader view, some people to bounce ideas off from. And in fact, as you build these relationships, you end up with suppliers and vendors and key resources and even alternatives that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So that's we think of that as being the answer to I'm new, whether you're new to the business entirely or whether you're new just to one piece of it.
Another one is inefficient design. A lot of people, when they have new products, whether you're new or maybe you just have great ideas, it's always tough to hold back a little bit. If you have a great idea, a lot of times you just want to run with it. But one thing that we've found is you really need to make sure you understand the specifications of what you're trying to do. Not just, what is your market? What is your price point? What is it supposed to do? How big is it supposed to be? How much strength should it have? And that gets tricky. And the fact of the matter, those are going to get shook out. It's just more effective to do it on the front side, because then you don't invest a lot of money in design and manufacturing and everything else and then realize that, oh, by the way, this really should have been done differently. I've got a personal example. I was on a project, and it was very, as most are, very rushed project. This was way back in my past, but the specifications weren't very clear, and there was a team of about 20 of us on it, and got it all spooled up into production. The first production came out, and then the customer, which was our parent company at the time, said, oh, no, I wanted to do, instead of 20 pounds, I wanted to be able to do 40 pounds at the end. Well, that was completely impossible with that design. And so they scrapped literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars because there wasn't clear specifications up front. Another example is DFMA. I don't know most people are familiar with it, but designing it for manufacturing up front. If it's going to be welded, tab and slot different parts. If it's going to be plastics, design in snap fits, get rid of the fasteners. All those parts, all those tracking, all those orders can be eliminated with the design if you can go from a 50-part assembly to a 10 or 15. And then on top of that, controlling change. We run into companies sometimes that, that engineering control isn't actually there. It's what happens is somebody out on the floor, or the owner or leadership says, hey, I want to do this. And so they go out on the floor and they work with people and they make it. And then engineering gets tossed back, oh, document this. And then it kind of gets done and halfway, and it doesn't actually get done the way it's supposed to, if you will. And so what engineering controls production means that engineering isn't a glorified secretary. Engineering is actually controlling, documenting, tolerancing, specifying all the product data rather than the other way around in just in a documentation state. Then in addition, if you have more than one person working on a project, you have to have some kind of data management system. So they pay for themselves time and time again. We use them here at Applied because saving over documents, having them on your local drive and not on the network, and then someone tries to get one and gets on the network, they do their design, and then they realize that, oh, this wasn't the latest and greatest version. That, or tying that into manufacturing, maybe there's a change made. Manufacturing's still working off the old prints, so the change doesn't actually happen. And so ECO, ECN, engineering change order, whatever your acronym is, make sure that there's a good solid process in place, because that's an enterprise-wide situation. You've got purchasing, you've got inventory, manufacturing, engineering, they're all involved. And so most companies have a good system like that, but for the smaller ones that are just getting going, make sure that process is established, and just stay ahead of the documentation, because when you get behind, it's like you can never get caught up.
So I think you'll find that most of these landmines are communication related. And let's talk specifically about, let's talk hypothetically about a couple of companies. They both wanted great communication between engineering and manufacturing. I think that's a huge communication breakdown, especially if there's multiple locations or whatever the case may be. In this case, communication, this breakdown was producing a lot of questions and impacting quality and also impacting the schedule. There's lots of questions, so much that the engineering team would have to walk from one building to another to multiple times a day to answer all these questions. And so, of course, that would certainly impact the schedule just because of the delay that was having, the impact that was having. So they took, each of these organizations took a little different approach. One was just kind of a manual approach where they had their engineers be closer to the manufacturing organization. And another one took a technology approach. However, technology, as we found, is only the vehicle for communication. It's not really the answer. It's just a method to the answer. And what we found was really the deeper cause was that one organization was stopping their design process at about 95% completion. They weren't taking the design, their CAD model all the way through to completion, and that was then producing a lot of, out on the manufacturing floor, that was producing a lot of questions and a lot of quality issues that needed to be resolved during the assembly process. Because of the other organization's completeness of design and their focus on communication and processes, one of these organizations was able to successfully move their engineering department to the corporate office, and that then allowed them to better synchronize with the rest of the organization and be more strategic, be closer to the marketing organization, be closer to sales, so that that process then could be much smoother. So one of the outputs of this, so I asked one of the organizations, what did they do as they made that move? And the answer was every time a challenge and they found a landmine is that they went back to that problem and they built a process around it so it could be repeatable, and they understood what the impact was and what the answers were, and clearly communicated that in work instructions so that when they solved it once, they solved it forever. And so that's really the answer, I think, to some of these communication breakdowns, is to not just implement a technology, but to understand the problem, understand where the communication is breaking down, and then deliver a solution that is permanent and work through the process so that the answer can be really strategic.
And continuing on that communication disconnect, if you will, for those who attended the previous webinar with Mark and Impact Dakota and talking about the Internet of Things, that's a very important aspect to think about communication, because you're getting real-time data from out on the floor. I know sometimes there's always, by the time management figures out there's a problem, it's usually showing up in the in the revenue or the profits, and it's as it was stated, it's a lagging indicator. What you need is real-time indicators. So rather than kicking out, a day or two or 3 or 4 or a week's worth of bad product, you can find out right away. You can make the change quicker, which minimizes the impact and keeps you moving a lot better. That's a big thing, and that has to do with getting those KPIs, those key product indicators, so that you can see what. That takes time to understand, to find out what are the KPI. And I know I work with customers, and that's a tricky thing. It's a whole different philosophy. What is, you think that, but, when you actually go down to start measuring it, the data tells you something a little bit different. And there's a lot of tweaks and adjustments in that to find out what your true KPI are. And KPRI, that was a tough sentence to say. Yeah. I got to tell you. So anyway, the other thing is inaccurate data. A lot of times people are mesmerized by stacks and stacks of data. But if the data isn't any good, if it's completed by humans or by memory, you're adding labor costs to gather that data, but also a lot of times it's not real accurate. So whether it's somebody out on the floor filling out the data at the end of the day, or at the end of the shift, or trying to figure it out, how long does it take to do that? And I made 8 of them and I worked 8 hours. We'll just say that's an hour each. That's not how you want to get. That's, in my opinion, inaccurate data, and it doesn't dig deep enough into where you're trying to get to. You want to find productive time, and that leads into the next one. Shallow data is, this process might have, or this work center might have 18 things happening and have actions in it, whether it's moving product or tightening bolts or whatever else. But if you're familiar with lean and such, diving into every one of those actions to find out which one's actually adding value and which ones are not adding value, and identifying the non-value add processes and figuring out a way to replace those, whether it's movements, if it's making kit carts or something, so all the parts are very close. Maybe it's material handling issues. Maybe it's cleaning up something that was done in a process previous that really didn't need to have happen, but it's adding time to the labor costs down the road. So, shallow data doesn't help. Inaccurate data doesn't help, and real-time data is where you want to be. Real-time, accurate, deep data.
We found one of our clients, if we looked at their productivity data throughout the day, according to the data, they did nothing from 8 to 4 p.m. But then from 4 to 5, they did all their work day. Yeah. All the whole day's work in 1 hour, and that's because that's when they entered the data into the system.
Right.
So that's just a good example. We find that communication, like we've said, is really the key to success, and we can have all the right skills and tools and data, but if we don't communicate that, then it's not going to be very good. It's going to produce a lot of friction. We all have access. Every organization typically has access to simple tools, but sometimes the problem is complex. And the most simple tool of all, and from a software development perspective, the thing that we replace the most is Microsoft Excel. Very simple tool, everyone has access to it, and it's easy to use, easy to put a spreadsheet out there. But this is an example of a situation. One group saw the success that another group had with their Excel spreadsheet, and they said, hey, would you send that to me? I want to use that too. And so they send it over, and then they start using their Excel spreadsheet, and then the management team comes along and says, I'd like a roll-up of your data and this other team's data. So that's what the black arrow is. They just send their data in, maybe produce, copy it into another sheet, and do a summary, and it all works good. Well, then another team, a similar team, not identical, but a similar team says, I'd like that same spreadsheet. I heard that was really successful. But they add a few columns, maybe change some data, and then they send it up to the administrative team and said, merge this together. Well, they might be able to do that with 2 or 3 spreadsheets, but then word gets out that everybody's using the spreadsheet, and so then you have the domino effect where other teams and other sub-teams and other similar and dissimilar organizations want to use that same spreadsheet. And it just really becomes the complexity of all of this. You have many, many teams trying to report into a simple tool, a complex situation, and it ends up being really getting overwhelmed. So what we did is we helped an organization really establish some standards, like what is it that you want to deliver? Each of these teams have some of their own unique data. Let's try to simplify it and establish some standards as to what we're going to measure, how we're going to track it, what kind of data is going to go into this application, so that it can meet everyone's needs, and still you can have some kind of roll-up reporting analysis because you've established some standards as to what this thing is going to do. And then the other was just to take a fresh start, to kind of throw away, not the idea, but to throw away this simple tool that was made complex and start fresh. Start with a new application, start by interviewing different team members, interviewing the management team as to what it is that they needed to see on a roll-up basis, and then start fresh. Trying to take something that is real simple like Excel and even make it more complicated or use macro features or whatever the case, ends up just making the entire process that much more difficult. So that's what we did. We helped this organization replace an Excel solution with new data, new technology, and that was the answer to that kind of a situation. Very common. We've done other similar situations with Microsoft Access. We had a gentleman at another client who was not getting the kind of support that he felt he needed from their IT group, so he went and built several, maybe more than 24 Microsoft Access databases that was important for their department. But then he made the announcement that he was retiring, and there was nobody else that knew that application or even knew what those databases were. So we ended up having to take over that as well and helping them through that kind of a solution. So sometimes the simple tools are good for small purposes, but oftentimes the answer is to take a step back, figure out what it is they want to do, and then make a fresh start.
The fourth problem that we've kind of identified or landmined is just being understaffed. We get it. Everybody runs lean. You have to these days to be competitive. But some things to keep in mind if you are in a situation where you can control some of that is a lot of times that, everyone's running lean and the products are going out the door, everybody's busy. Then you decide, hey, you know what? We're going to design it. We're going to produce a new product. So usually that just gets piled onto the team, and somehow they're supposed to keep everything else running too and design and build a new product. And so that's challenging, and I get it, but it's a landmine that happens is if you're working out in design and you're spending maybe 4 hours out on the floor, working with, advancing manufacturing practices, and then you're doing 4 hours of new design, and all of a sudden you have to go to new design all the time. So you're working, say 10 hours of designing a new product. Well, what's happening out on the floor then? What stopped? Continuation engineering. This is one that we run into very regularly. Is organizations have a laundry list of projects that they already know the ROI is there to fix a project, maybe take some costs out of a big assembly, or get rid of some welding, do some casting, but they just don't have the resources to do it. That's another challenge, and Applied can help in those situations, obviously. But what we found is the solution to those situations is prioritize. And I'm singing to the choir here probably, but leadership needs to prioritize what is actually the top priority. And all of us that are raised in the Midwest always just say, yep, we can get it done. We need to also be realistic with ourselves and say, you know what, this can't be done in this time frame. Or, try to find different solutions, whether it's partnerships or readjusting product schedules. Applied never gets called when there's a project that needs to be done 8 months from now. We get called when there's already serious issues with scheduling. And that's great. That's our role. That's our business. But if a lot of times that can be avoided by adjusting schedules, or, just getting the prioritization right, partnerships with, maybe you can, pass off some of the design work or different things with, your vendors or different things like that to, find a new, lower cost bearing or whatever the projects are. But staffing, I think it's probably been a landmine since the beginning of time. But it's something that we need to recognize, because I know here at Applied, you can't sustain, 60, 70, 80 hours a week without doing some collateral damage in the person's life. And so just one of those things that we've recognized as a pitfall or a landmine that really, it's kind of like the checkbook. If you spend a little extra, it's got to come from somewhere. And it's the same with resources. If you're going to add things to the wish list, either something's coming off or there's going to be the need to be extra resources. So that would be the fourth pitfall.
So this is oftentimes a red flag for other issues. We have when one of our staff comes on to maybe has either some fresh eyes or just to do some resource augmentation in an organization, whether it be our software development team or whether it be our engineering team. It's great to have fresh eyes, but one thing that's unique is that our team oftentimes works differently than employees, because we're really heads down. And one thing that we challenge our clients to do is make sure that our team, our staff has enough work, because we'll oftentimes work significantly faster, not because our guys and gals are any smarter or better or whatever the case may be. It's just that they're really heads down, very focused, and they don't have to respond to fires. And it's oftentimes a really good idea to have, if organization is understaffed, to find out what is the cause of that. Are there a lot of fires? Is there a lot of communication problems? And what is really leading to the situation being understaffed? And having somebody like an applied engineer or software developer come in and have some fresh eyes on the problem can maybe identify the reasons why there's an inefficiency or why the understaffing really is occurring. So these are just a few. We probably could have come up with many other landmines, pitfalls, whatever you want to call them. We would welcome any kind of questions. If you want to type some questions into the webinar, you're welcome to do that. I think we have a couple of questions here. We'll take some of those.
Here's a question. First one is, how does Applied work on manufacturing projects?
I think we've been talking mostly about engineering design and communication. I think they're asking about other areas that we help.
Yeah, and for those who aren't familiar with what Applied does, our professional services group is what we call all of our engineers, software development team, and everything. It's kind of boiled down into three groups: design, manufacturing, and software development. Well, there's a lot of crossover between design and manufacturing. We find that really good design engineers also have manufacturing experience and vice versa. But we, a lot of times, will go in on just to add some extra support to on factory floor. We've got probably at least 25 engineers working every day in a manufacturing engineering role, just augmenting staff to get some more projects done. Manufacturing is quite frankly, is a pretty easy justification for bringing in somebody else in because typically everything in manufacturing is quantified quite well. And so if you can save a minute here, a minute there, reduce costs here, having that person on staff to help out while there's some projects identified makes really good business sense. That can be anywhere from jigs and fixtures, layout, kind of a lot of different areas. We adapt to what our customers need. Does that make sense?
Sounds good.
All right.
Another question regarding completeness of design and work instructions. How does that relate to other parts of the business? I think we found through our visiting clients is that the rest of the organization does not appreciate the value that's inside a 3D CAD model as much. There's just an enormous amount of information. We've found that integration between the CAD system and ERP, purchasing, having all of that together produces some incredible results. One of the clients that we work with, as soon as they mark their model as being complete, it transfers the bill of materials over to their ERP, and they can immediately they can place orders against that immediately rather than the data being typed in and making mistakes and those kinds of things, costing going inaccurate, those kinds of things. So, but that's other parts I think we've seen where, Steve, maybe you can talk a little bit later here about work instructions, but we've seen where a complete CAD model can help with producing marketing materials, cutaways, animation, all those kinds of things that marketing is regularly asking for anyway, and having them in the loop, prior to product release, so they don't have to rely on pictures or prototypes or those kinds of things. So they can have a CAD model that they can begin doing their marketing materials and launching the product even as the final product is being developed is a huge asset to the rest of the organization. And so we encourage our clients to take that extra step, go that last mile in completing their model so that it has it can produce the kind of value that it needs to across the rest of the organization.
Yeah, and adding to that, there's 15, 20 years ago, or maybe even less than that ago, sales and marketing would be in series with product development or engineering, or those can be running in parallel now. And so rather than having that lag time, because I don't know if other people's CEOs or whatever have quantified the time cost of getting to market and what those dollars mean, but at a previous place that I worked, I was regularly reminded about how many millions of dollars we're losing out every day because it's not on the market. And so being able to take those little steps, such as taking renderings and animations and cutaways and creating those materials and putting them on the website to start the sales process before the project's even done, as far as being in manufacturing, that can be a huge cost savings or a huge boon for the company. In addition, on the completeness of the design, from my own personal experience, I've learned that, for a long time, a lot of organizations never put hardware and different things into assemblies, whether it was because of the overhead as far as the CAD models or the parts and assemblies that just got too big or what have you. But what I've found and what I've seen is that adding everything in is, if possible. I understand there's some companies that have massive assemblies and it doesn't work that way, but to be able to have everything in there, every bolt in there, every washer, so you understand exactly the length you need of the bolt, you make sure that hole clearance is just right, the holes are aligned, and do that all digitally with your model, digital prototyping, if you will. When you do release that product, you have a full and complete BOM. And so that is hugely important, because I know a lot of organizations, they just have bolt pins, and here's the parts, go grab the bolt pins. Well, Jim might use a, 1 3/4 bolt, and, Jay over there, he might need to use a 2-inch one because he likes a little extra threads past the nylock nut. And so just having control over that down to that degree is very important for quality. It's very important for consistency. And with consistency, then you can refine and like it said, you can't manage what you don't measure. And if you're not measuring exactly the hardware going into products other than by the bolt, your bolt supplier costs, it can be important. So that's what the completeness design means to my little head anyway.
Well, we don't have any more questions. There are lots of other landmines, lots of other situations. At Applied, we have visibility into lots of different organizations and see lots of challenges, and we've met a lot of those challenges, and we're always open to a conversation about what's going on in everybody's business, and if there's something that we can help with, we will. And so I'd like to thank you for attending this webinar. Don't hesitate to call us. If there's something that we can help you with, we'll certainly give it a try. Thank you and take care.